Hey guys, I hope you had a great weekend. Monday morning here. This is week 6 we're starting. So I'm going to do a quick preview to week 6 and then I'm going to go over your last night quiz with you. So week 6 coming in here. This would normally be the week, even if we were in school, that we'd be wrapping up the novel night because the novel night is obviously not very long. So normally we would do a couple of different activities in class and in school, of course, that would be kind of like all encompassing, conclusive end of the novel activities. You know, we usually have class discussion and a couple other things when we're all together. So I had to kind of alter what that week looked like for this. So I did not want to give you a final test. I did not want to give you any kind of challenging end of night assignment. So instead, I decided to just kind of make it 2 different creative based assignments. So my hope is that you still find this week, while it is kind of an ending, all-encompassing week to the novel night, I still hope you find it somewhat easy. So essentially, the 2 assignments that you guys will be doing this week is 1, you'll be writing a poem, which I know probably makes some of your hearts stop a little bit, but we'll get to that in a second. And then the second thing you guys will be doing is responding to a journal entry in 2 paragraphs. So 1 poem and 2 paragraphs. That's the meat of what you're turning in this week, okay? So the first thing is called Night Found Poem, and you'll find actually both of these assignments under the Night Survival Unit folder. So the Night Found Poem is a poem that is essentially found within the novel Night. So you guys will see I left directions for you on that Word document in the folder titled Night Found Poem. And the directions really should be very step-by-step and self-explanatory. You're going to essentially flip through the novel Night, either a physical copy that you have in front of you or the online copy that I posted. And once you have chosen a major theme, so you could focus on the family aspect of the novel Night, very specifically the father-son bond. You could focus on tragedy, you could focus on loss, you could focus on finding hope. I mean, the sky is the limit, and I left you more theme possibilities in that Word document. But once you have focused on a very specific theme for your poem, you are then essentially going to scan through the novel and look for any phrases, any direct quotes within the novel that apply to your theme, and then you're going to jot those down, either handwritten and then type, or you could just kind of copy paste and type it into another Word document. And then you're basically going to take all of those phrases that you find that you think apply to your theme, and you're going to construct Elie Wiesel's words into a new creative 15-line poem. It's called Found Poetry. So if you guys are struggling, by all means reach out. But my hope is that this is a way of kind of honing in on a theme that you took away from the novel Night, and then having a chance to kind of do a little bit of a creative take on a final assignment for this particular novel. So that's your first one. The second one is super easy, guys. You're basically just choosing one of 2 journal questions that I have for you. These are opinionated questions, so those should be the easiest kinds of prompts to respond to. And because they are opinionated journal entries, you may use I. It is technically not quite academic writing, so you may use I statements like in my opinion or I think. So these should come very naturally to you. You're just picking one, but please make sure you're giving me 2 complete paragraphs. That's 6 to 8 sentences per paragraph. I can tell you that's going to be the only thing I can take off points for during this assignment, is if you do not give me 2 full paragraphs, okay? All right, so I'm going to switch gears here. And like I said, those are your only 2 assignments this week. Keep in mind, of course, that No Red Ink, your very last No Red Ink assignment, y'all, opens on Monday the 4th, today, but you have 2 weeks to do it. So if you wanted to pace yourself with that and start it, you can, or wait till next week. That's up to you. Your very last No Red Ink assignment. I won't say ever because I know they use it in 10th grade, but I'll say for me, okay? Night quiz number 3. Overall, guys, the scores have been really good. There are maybe 1 or 2 hiccups that I'm seeing here, but I'm just going to go over this quiz relatively quickly, give you the right answers so you have them. And as always, if you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out, okay? All right, so number 1, the question was, what happened to Zalman? This was when they were marching from one camp to the next, and many soldiers were struggling to keep up. Many soldiers were prisoners were just exhausted, struggling to keep up. And the correct answer to this one was A, that he fell and was trampled to death. I would say that probably about 99% of you got this one correct. Number 2, it says, why does Wiesel tell the story of Rabbi Eliyahu? So again, I think I would probably say about 80% of you hit this right on this nail, but some of you struggled a little bit with this one. Many of you focused more so on the fact that Rabbi Eliyahu was this very predominant figure in the Jewish community and kind of focused on his presence and what he meant. But that wasn't the question. The question was very specifically asking why he told that specific story at this point in the novel surrounding the rabbi. And that story was, of course, that the rabbi's son, for all intents and purposes, just abandoned him, completely left because he knew that it would be easier for him as the young son to survive without trying to keep up with his father. So whereas his father was looking for him and worried about him, the son had just abandoned him. And for the most part, unfortunately, many people knew that that's what he had done, except for, of course, the rabbi himself. So the point of Eli telling that story was that it was obviously something that stuck with him, that when he sat down years later to write this memoir, he still could not get that story and what he thought after out of his heart and out of his head. And that was that he sat down and prayed right then and there, please God, do not let me ever do that to my father. He knew that there was the absolute real possibility that he could, and many of you agreed and admitted within your responses that he maybe had even thought about it, and he had, but he was practically begging God in that moment, don't let me do that to my father as well. So he was doing it as an example and showcasing this story as an example of what he really hoped and prayed he would not become at this point in his journey. So then number 3, why did Eli think he was hallucinating when he was trying to avoid suffocation? So many of you, I would say most of you again, got this one correct. It was C, that he was hearing the violin music and thought it was just a figment of his imagination, even though there was in fact violin music playing in the background. Number 4, how did Eli's father avoid being selected? Okay, so some of you were a little funky on your wording with this one. So if you got 1 or 2 points off, pay attention here. There are 2 lines, right? So the weak went to one side, they were obviously not going to live. And the ones that looked like they were strong enough to continue working were sent to the other side. So Eli was very clearly sent to the right side, to the side that he looked young, strong enough at some point to continue working. His dad, not so much. So his dad was sent to the weak side. Eli, just out of his sheer instinct and gut knee-jerk reaction, ran after his father. I mean, ran after him, yelling, screaming, you name it. And in this commotion, in this craziness, they were able to essentially sneak back over to the other side. He was able to sneak his father over to the non-selected side. So some of you said that he inched his way over. If you did not very specifically say that Eli's first reaction was that he ran after his father and it was this commotion that helped, you may have seen a point or 2 taken off. Because if he had not just instinctively run after his father and caused this massive commotion, simply sneaking him over was not going to work. So obviously it was in that commotion and the physical running aspect that made that plan work. Well, it really wasn't much of a plan. It just happened to work out. Number 5, why did the 2 men try to throw Eli's father from the carriage? This is like an awful scene. I hate reading this scene, but it's D. He appeared to be dead. His dad was like in such an exhausted state that he just looked like he was dead, and Ellie knew he wasn't, but he was trying to rest on the train. And you might recall that these men were basically throwing the dead off the train just to make room, because they were so jam-packed into these cattle cars that they, could use any little space that they could get. Next one, how were Meir and his son like other fathers and sons Wiesel described? And what is he saying about the concentration camps and how they affected the bonds between loved ones? So I had given you a special little hint here to make sure you answer both questions. So some of you got some points off if you did not specifically answer both here. So Meir and his son, this was the story in which Meir was essentially beating his father over a piece of bread, because he was starving to the point where he was so desperate that his own survival instinct kicked in, and he was essentially killing his father for that one piece of bread. And Ellie showcases this story, just like he showcased the story earlier of the rabbi and his son abandoning him, to explain that in these concentration camps, you had many family relationships. So not even just fathers and sons. I mean, that was the most predominant relationship he witnessed, but I'm sure this would span over any other kind of relationship with mothers and daughters, or maybe grandparents or whomever. But that you would come into the camp with every intention of staying together as a family, helping each other out, relying on one another for survival, maybe even putting one's needs before your own. And then by the end, at this point, they had been through so much. They were so starved. They were so desperate. They were so exhausted. They were so degraded that absolutely nothing mattered except for their survival instinct. And that it was an everyone for themselves type of mentality. And that sons were quite honestly pretty ruthless to their fathers in this moment. So that was kind of the overall message he was exhibiting. Some of you maybe did not catch on to that, and some of you said that the concentration camps made their bond stronger. So if you said that, you probably received 2 points off, because that was the intention at the beginning, right? But they're talking about at this current point in time, we see that that is no longer the case, that they are very much just fighting for their own individual survival. Number 7, why did Wiesel leave his father when the sirens wailed? So this is as they were arriving to the new camp, and the sirens were wailing, and they had just been running through the night, through the snow, so exhausted. And a couple of you will notice, in fact, I would say probably about 75% of you had some points taken off of this one, because the wording of this one is tricky. If you said anything along the lines of the fact that Ellie purposely left his father, you had points taken off, because in that moment, he did not instinctively stop and say, I'm leaving you because you can't keep up. Did the thought cross his mind at one point when they were running? Yes. But in that moment, if you go back and look at the very specific language used, he verbatim says, in that moment, I forgot I even had a father. That he was simply following the crowd, following his survival instinct to get inside, out of the cold. And in fact, it wasn't until the next morning, I think the line verbatim says, it wasn't until the next morning that I even recalled that I had a father. So yes, then he felt very guilty, because in that moment when all he could think about was his own survival, he didn't instinctively say, later, Dad, you're on your own. He just followed the crowd and completely forgot about his dad. And it wasn't until he had actually gotten to sleep and get out of the cold and rest for a minute that he kind of came to and was like, oh crap, my dad, and went out looking for him. So that was the full credit response, that he forgot about his father. So if you said something along the lines of purposefully wanting to be rid of him, you maybe just had a couple points off depending on your wording. Okay. Almost there. Number 8, why did Ellie decide to be an invalid? And again, I think 95% of you got this one right. This was when his dad was clearly not doing well. It was towards the end of his father's life. And he simply wanted to be near his father. So he basically worsened or made his own condition seem worse so that he could be in kind of this invalid ward that they called it of the hospital, to kind of be near his father when he knew his father was going to die. Number 9, why did the SS flee the camp? This was because the resistant movement was coming. In fact, I think verbatim it says American tanks were at the gate, and the SS knew that they could not, like in a perfect world, they would have collected all of their evidence, they would have killed more prisoners, they would have done everything they can to, escape with accomplishing more of their mission, but the resistance movement had just caught up to them too quickly, so all they could do was flee like crazy. So the American tanks, the armed soldiers, were there to basically liberate the people and to punish the SS soldiers. So then last but not least, guys, was what was Wiesel's first act as a free man? So verbatim it says our very first instinct was to throw ourselves on the rations, that is to eat. That was the first thing that they wanted to do as a free group of men, was to eat as much food as they possibly can, which I'm sure we could all relate to, and we've never even experienced that level of starvation that he did. So that was it, guys. I know that this book was really heavy, to say the least, but I am really looking forward to reading some of your journal response entries, because one of the things that you could answer is basically just what you thought of this book. And again, I know it's a short read, but it's not a light read, if that makes sense, because this is a very heavy book. So that is another reason why this would be normally a book I'd kind of talk you through more, since it's obviously so heavy. So it's another reason why I wanted to just add on that journal response to this week's assignment, is to kind of just talk to you in a way I could, or to hear from you in a way I could, just about kind of what you were thinking in reference to this novel. I know you guys did a Holocaust themed unit in 8th grade. Most of you did. I know you do at Central. So I know that this isn't your first time reading about the Holocaust, but still, I know it's not easy. So definitely take your time in responding to those journal responses. I promise you, even though I might not be able to provide feedback as specifically to every single one of you with things, I am reading everything. I'm absolutely enjoying reading everything that you guys turn in, and I am really looking forward to this week's work, both the poems and the journal responses. So if you guys have any questions for me at all, reach out, and I am here for you. I miss you guys, and we'll talk soon. Bye.